This week, we're joined by the wonderful Nicole Stott to talk about her life and her new book, Back to Earth. What life in space taught me about our home planet and our mission to protect it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to her, but also we're going to get you back up to date with all the latest news from the world of spaceflight.
Please continue to get in touch with your thoughts on what we're up to. We're at Space and Things 1 on Twitter and at Space and Things Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Or leave a review on your podcast platform.
Yeah, we've been doing it a year. You haven't done it yet. Come on, do it. It's time.
Come on.
And don't forget to hit that share button as well. It really helps us out. But right now, please enjoy episode 53 of the Space and Things podcast.
Oh my God. Unbelievable. But it is right to touch.
You're listening to Space and Things with Dave Giles and Emily Carney.
I'm Emily Carney.
And I'm Dave Giles, and welcome to episode 53 of our podcast. Emily, we're matching. We're wearing matching t-shirts.
Yeah, we're both wearing the same shirt today.
We've been doing this for a year, and this is the first time this has happened. Crazy.
Yeah, this is nuts. We're both wearing our High Frontier shirt today.
I'm actually surprised this is the first time this has happened.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and it's funny because I woke up this morning and I was like, man, today's a taping day. I better wear a nice space shirt, or something like that. And I was like, oh, High Frontier. I'll do that one. That's a good one. And then I'm like, and I saw you and I was like, oh my God, we're wearing the same one. That's insane. That's pretty funny.
Very amusing. Very amusing. Now, before we get going, I'd just like to bring to people's attention that you've had two blog posts out in the last month, Emily. One was a review of a book called Picturing the Space Shuttle by J.L. Pickering, and there's one called Envisioning the Space Shuttle from 1970 to 1980, which shows a series of photos from the development of the shuttle. And this one was part of your Space in the 70s series, I believe, right?
Yeah. It's mainly just photos. The book by J.L. Pickering and John Bisney, Picturing the Space Shuttle. Here's a free advertisement for that book. Go get it. It's amazing. JL runs Retro Space Images, and for ages, he's been putting out some of the most hard-to-find space photos. If you're into that, it's just it's like heaven. So yeah, this book is fantastic. There's tons of stuff in there that I'd never seen before. You got to go get it. But I was kind of inspired, so I did a blog post last week, or this week. Yeah, whatever. Sometime. About the space shuttle when it was being, when they were putting it together, basically, when they were thinking about it, kind of before the space shuttle even flew. Because I think there's sort of, in the space community, there's sort of this myth that, oh yeah, it started flying in 1981 and that was the beginning of it. And I'm like, they started developing that during, the late 60s, early 70s, so it really took forever. It took a while for them to get it off the ground. Space shuttle is very complicated, so it took a while for it to get off, and I love the space shuttle, obviously, and I don't know, I love that whole era during the 70s when they were like, well, we want to build this really crazy flying plane / rocket, but we're not really sure what we're doing yet. So we don't really know what we're doing, but we're going to try it, So I kind of love it.
And our budget's been cut. Again. And our budget's been cut.
And we have no money.
Again. But we'll keep trying, but our budget's been cut. Again.
Exactly.
But I hadn't actually seen a lot of the photos that you put in your latest blog post, so I found it really fascinating. I'm going to put links to both of those blog posts in our show notes, as always. But before we get started, I would just really like to thank everyone who has purchased our 1-year anniversary patch, which we talked about last week. We only have a limited amount, and they're nearly all gone, which is quite something. So if you haven't got one yet, you can still get one. You can either sign up to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Space and Things, or head over to our merch store on our website, spaceandthingspodcast.com, where we also have all the show notes, as we say every week. But anyway, let's crack on.
Yes, let's crack on.
That's never going to get old.
No.
1 year on, and crack on is still my catchphrase for this, I think.
It's
anyway.
still there.
SpaceX Dragon, we're go for launch. Let's light this candle.
So with this being the first show of year 2 of our podcast, we wanted to start strong. So we asked if former NASA astronaut Nicole Stott would join us to talk about her new book, Back to Earth, What Life in Space Taught Me About Our Home Planet and Our Mission to Protect It.
Nicole is a veteran NASA astronaut with 2 space flights and 104 days living and working in space as a crew member on both the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle. She was the 10th woman in history to perform a spacewalk and was also the first astronaut to paint with watercolors in space, which she did on her free time on the space station. She is also a NASA aquanaut and was a crew member on an 18-day saturation dive mission at the Aquarius Undersea Laboratory. So we're very excited to talk to her today about all of the things she's been up to.
All right, you are go for TLI, over. Roger, understand, we're go for TLI.
Welcome, Nicole, to our podcast. It's a real honor to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us. But let's start right at the beginning. When you were a child, did you want to be an astronaut? Or when did that idea first come to you or look like it was a thing you might like to do?
Yeah. Well, I could say, I know that perhaps I don't look old enough to, you can put the filter on, to have seen that first moon landing. But I did, when I was a kid. And I think even at 6 or 7 years old, you realize that's an extraordinary thing that you're witnessing, right? Sitting in front of the black and white TV with the grilled cheese sandwich. I mean, I think you get it. And then, I remember my parents taking my sister and I out to look at the moon and just kind of think about that. And so it definitely got into me there, but I didn't grow up as a kid saying, like some of my colleagues have said, like from that moment, I knew, I was going to pursue being an astronaut. Everything I did was going to be about being an astronaut. There was none of that.
Yeah.
And, I'm really thankful. My parents shared what they loved with me, and my mom, very creative. She was a nurse. And, if I was going to get to an art lesson or ballet lesson or something, or softball practice, whatever, it's because, she got me there. And then one of the places she got me was out to the local airport where my dad built and flew small airplanes. And I think that's where the flying thing definitely got in my blood there. And Emily, that's just right up the street at Clearwater Air Park. I grew up in Clearwater, went to Clearwater High, where also Bruce Melnick went. We should do a show sometime with the two of us. But
yeah, we should. I did not know he went to Clearwater High. Wow, I went to Eastlake, and my sister went to Countryside. So did
you have my brother? I know we got off, Dave, we got off the topic here, but let me just tell you. So if you went to Eastlake, did you have my brother-in-law Greg Rocktoff for like sociology or geography or psychology, one of those kind of classes?
I did not have him, but all my friends did.
Mr. Rocktop. Yeah.
I remember him, and I don't want to tell you this. One of my friends had a crush on him.
Oh, yeah. That's what I hear.
She would call him Mr. Rock Your Socks Off.
Oh, my God.
He's still there.
Oh, wow.
Rocking it. Yeah. Surfing, all of it. It's small world, Dave. I'm sorry.
No, I love that.
Anyway.
I absolutely love that. We are called Space and Things,
yeah.
so
and things.
The
yes.
and things are important.
Things.
And then the other thing with the Clearwater High School thing is that Bruce Melnick went there, and other than the high school where those twins Scott and Mark went, Clearwater High, I still believe, is the only high school with 2 astronaut graduates.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
So anyway, I developed this love for flying, like wanting to know how things fly too. And that led me to studying aeronautical engineering over on the East Coast of Florida at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, where, plug for my son, who just started, Monday was his first day of college over there. And that was just up the road from the Kennedy Space Center. And I started to see more and more like, man, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly?
Absolutely.
And here's this Kennedy Space Center that I've watched since growing up, things going on there. And when I graduated from high school, it was 88 or 87. And I got a job about a year later at NASA at the Kennedy Space Center on the shuttle program when we were getting back into flight post Challenger. And I didn't think it could get any better. I mean, the jobs I had there, but I was really fortunate to get to meet astronauts as we were getting the vehicles ready for them to fly. And, I'm slow. It took me 8 or 9 into the 10 years that I was there to think, oh my gosh, astronauts, 99.9% of their job is not flying in space. You know, and at least 80 of it was a lot like what I was already doing as an engineer. And I think that's what got me really thinking about it. Like, oh, maybe I could at least consider this. And I spoke to a couple people I consider to be mentors. And, you know, because up until that point also, I thought, you know, astronaut was one of those jobs only other special people get to do, right? Why would they ever pick me? I've not ever done anything that, you know, they'd pick some person to be an astronaut for or anything like that. And very thankful that I had mentors that just encouraged me to pick up the pen and fill out the application. I mean, honestly, they didn't say, you know, they didn't say, oh, Nicole, you'll make the greatest astronaut there ever was. It was like they gave me permission to do the one thing I had total control of and that I would not have done on my own. And so believe me, I thank them when I see them. So long rambling way of saying no as a child. Here's the short answer. No, I did not from childhood always, you know, think that's what, you know, what I would do. But I'm really thankful that I had experiences along the way that encouraged me.
So you've touched on this a little bit, but obviously before you came to NASA, before you applied to be an astronaut, and before you became an astronaut, you worked for the space program. What kinds of experiences there you think prepared you for your time as an astronaut?
Wow, I think all of them, actually. You know, everything from the chance to, you know, to work with the people there that really, and you guys know this, I mean, in the space industry, people that work in it, I mean, they love it, right? And the people that were at the Kennedy Space Center and still are, I mean, I get the sense they really feel like, you know, the care and feeding of those spacecraft is their responsibility, right? It's kind of like in them to, you know, to do that. And those are great people to work with, you know, to get the chance to work with those kinds of people. Especially later, if you're going to strap into one of those rockets, you want to know that the people care about, you know, care about what they're doing. But I think every aspect of getting the space shuttles ready to fly, you know, kind of the integration of what needs to go into getting a rocket ship ready to fly was useful. Getting to be like up close and personal with the hardware, you know, having the chance, you know, not just to go, which is awesome, like in the orbiter processing facility, just walk out and look up and like, oh my gosh, there's a space shuttle, but to get in the cockpit or to crawl around in the payload bay, to see some of the details that, you know, underlie the panels that, you know, you end up interacting with later, just to know the complexity and then at the same time, some of the simplicity of it too, that, you know, is there. Yeah, I'll tell you, I felt like I had a huge advantage when I started in the astronaut office, because most of that to start off with it's a lot like going back to school and they want to teach you all about, you know, the spacecraft that you might fly on. And so, you know, I left this job where I was up close and personal with the hardware, with the technicians working right on it, to sitting in a classroom in Houston with PowerPoint slides about auxiliary power units and shuttle main engines and solid rocket boosters and stuff, and just thinking like, man, why don't we just go to KSC for a couple weeks and hang out with those guys in the hangar? It'll be a lot quicker and more fun, you know? But yeah, I think it was a definite advantage, quite honestly, and to have evolved through that, like to have this NASA job where it's, oh, now I've got one where there might be this bonus of flying in space one day, which, you know, was a little bit different.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And talking of experiences from before you flew in space, one of our Patreons, John Wisenhunt, I hope I'm saying your surname correctly there, John, but he got in contact and he said he'd love to know more about your opinions on analog missions. Did your own experience of the Nemo undersea mission help you when you eventually went to space? What did you find most valuable from that experience of being an aquanaut?
Yeah, I think, you know, in the training that we do, all of it, you know, even sitting in those classrooms, you know, with the PowerPoint slides on the system stuff, all of it in one way or another is, you know, is ultimately about how are you going to work together as a crew, figuring out, you know, your own strengths and weaknesses, how you're going to, you know, first of all, acknowledge that you might have weaknesses. You know, that's a difficult thing to do, but, you know, you got to go there and acknowledge that it's okay for your crewmates to have weaknesses too, right? Because they're probably going to be able to do something you can't do as well. And so figuring out how to bring all that together, and some of the best ways that we do that are with those analog missions? Yeah, I love the question because, we do a lot of those analog missions, and I would even include the survival training that we do, like winter survival, sea survival in the Soyuz out in the Black Sea and stuff, which all are some of the most fun training that you can do. And the whole time you're doing it, you're thinking, man, I hope I really don't have to do this in real life. But it's great that we're training just in case. But this is really fun doing it, as you're practicing and training for it. The absolute best of those was to live on the Aquarius undersea habitat for the Nemo mission. And I think it's because unlike going and doing, say, a 10-day trip out in the Utah Canyonlands, which I did do, when you go and you get down to 60 feet underwater where the habitat sits on the floor of the ocean off the coast of Key Largo, when you get down there and you've been there more than an hour, you can't just swim safely to the surface, right? Your body's saturated with nitrogen. You've got to go through a lot of things to, like, it would be a really slow ascent, to get back up safely. So you're now in this place that is a real extreme environment. There's no minivan waiting outside the door. There's no, like radio call to the helicopter to come get you. You really and truly have to figure out how to deal with everything, stuff that goes wrong, stuff that's going right at that place, 60 feet underwater. And that's absolutely what we have to do in space. You can't just float out the door in space without special equipment on. Same thing is true on, the Aquarius habitat. The way you do that, you have to follow certain rules. Like when you're on a spacewalk, you're not allowed to unhook and just, tool around like George Clooney did in Gravity or anything, right? You've got rules of engagement about that for your safety. Same thing's true on Aquarius. Because we're at 60 feet and saturated, we can only go to the top of the habitat, and we can go deeper all we want, but we can't go up any further. So we have to be, really situationally aware of what's going on. And then you're living in a really relatively confined space with your crewmates, figuring out how you're going to manage all those strengths and weaknesses and differences and, still have a successful mission. It is awesome. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. And it was the best analog to what it was like to live and work in space. And I'll just say, you guys, you tell me to shut up anytime. So, you guys know Ron Guerin, right? And
yeah.
he was on, he and I were on our Nemo mission together, and it was with Dave Williams, was our commander from Canada. He had flown before. And then we had a gentleman named Dr. Tim Broderick, who was a physician, who did all kinds of like work with DARPA and really interesting telemedicine stuff. And he was on our crew too. But Ron and I hadn't flown in space before when we did this mission. And I have this memory of sitting at the galley table with him, like the morning we were going to get ready to come back up. We had turned the whole habitat into this chamber, to this lock that allowed us to, decrease the pressure up to sea level pressure again and slowly bring us to a point where we could leave. And just sitting there looking out the window, at this beautiful, like inner space environment surrounding us, and just said to each other, you know what? If we never get to fly in space, this was really awesome. It's just another way to look at this planet, right? To experience it from a whole new perspective that just opens your eyes up to the different realities and, the awe and wonder of it. And I get goosebumps thinking of it now. And, Ron and I never flew in space together, but we talk a lot about that Nemo experience and how just being blessed to be in that place and see Earth kind of surrounding you that way for an extended period of time was on par, I would say, with spaceflight.
Awesome.
Sounds incredible.
That's really cool.
Sounds incredible.
No, I want to do something like that.
They're pretty cool. There are ways to get down there, and so we'll have to think about that sometime too. Maybe we can do a show from the galley table of Aquarius.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Oh my gosh. That would be cool. Mm-hmm. My family would die, but that would be cool. They'd be like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Oh my God. Like, I would love it. I'd be like, see ya. I'll be back in a few weeks. All right. So you are, I believe you're the first artist to paint in space. Many of our listeners know Nicole is an amazing artist. So, were there any artists, space artists, general artists, whoever, who inspired you and how?
Wow. I think, our friend Alan Bean, definitely, there's a man who was absolutely, I mean, at least for me, like hero of space flight, hero of art, hero of like friendship and mentorship, those kinds of things. He definitely did. And in common with him, I really have always loved Monet and that kind of, impressionist beauty kind of impressionism that, is of like a Monet kind of art. But my art completely experimental all the time. There's no training at all involved with it. It's just, is this going to be fun? And, will I enjoy it? And maybe it ends up looking like something that it's meant to look like. I don't know. But it was definitely something that was, exciting to me to have the opportunity to do in space. To me, it's like these things that we do where we recognize that we're not just working there, right? It's like putting the human in human space flight and bringing those things about humanity with us, and that are part of us. And, I did the first watercolor in space, but I credit, Richard Garriott with the first painting, even though he won't say it was a painting. He says it's painting in space, but he doesn't really, like, he didn't paint it, right? So on his mission, he brought up like all different colored acrylic paints. It was very Jackson Pollock. Like he built a clear glove box, and then he stuck the paper all around the walls of the glove box, and then he just squirted the paints all into the box.
Oh, wow.
And wherever they floated themselves and hit the paper, that's what the painting ended up being. So a lot of dots, colored dots on paper. I think that was really very cool. And,
Nice,
his dad was an astronaut, flew Skylab stuff. And then his mom was an artist as well and designed some patches for their crew and things. So, and when Richard flew, he did a lot of outreach, little short outreach videos for people. And that was one of them. It was like, what would paint do, if you let it float around and hit paper in space? And of course, musical instruments and Karen Nyberg. I mean, you guys need to talk to her sometime. Talk about an artist, man. One of the most incredibly talented artistic people I've ever met. And, she quilted in space. And of course, you can go back as far as Alexei Leonov to the colored pencils and orbital sunrise drawings and portraits of Tom Stafford and, and their crewmates on Apollo Soyuz. That there's all these I don't know, there's just all these cool human things about, these people that we just tend to think of as technical, sciencey, folks that have so much going on. And I think the other person that later in life really affected me, maybe not so much with what I paint, but just in the way I think about things, is our friend Al Warden, who, this poet that if you just met him, you might not think poet.
No,
that wouldn't be the first word that would come out of your mouth to describe him. And yet, when you get to know him and you talk to him, I mean, I just miss knowing that those two owls are on the planet with us, because I think there was just such a way of communicating their experiences that was just so inspirational and just so them. Once you got to know them, it's like, wow, that's, okay, that's them.
Yep, absolutely.
Nicole, can I just ask, what was the process of painting a watercolor in zero gravity? Because in my head, that just sounds a mess. How did you keep everything together? Was it complicated, or was that part of the fun of it?
I think it was part of the fun of it. I mean, that's the way I like to think about, everything that you do in a microgravity environment, is that it's just all part of the adventure of it being different in some way. I mean, I like that a lot better than thinking I was going to go to a space station and everything I did would be exactly like we do, down here on Earth and gravity. It was different, but it was challenging, I think, but it wasn't impossible, right? And you said it. I mean, the biggest thing is just keeping your stuff organized. And that's true of all of living and working in microgravity.
Oh, yeah.
You float, your tools float, everything floats. And on top of that, you've got the airflow coming through the space station to circulate. And Frank DeWinna lost his glasses 3 times. And each time it would be like a month before they'd float up out.
Oh my God.
And so thankfully we had a couple extra pairs like are on one of mine. But it's weird because you think, oh, I'll just let this thing go and it'll just stay there, or it'll at least be where and then you're looking and you can't see it. And the way stuff pops up out of nowhere, it's like, you got to be really careful. I mean, I had a time where I'm floating through a module and I'm like, that's weird. What is that? And I'm kind of floating. And as I come up on it, it was this pencil, like point end on, just floating, floating. And
oh boy.
I mean, if you just kind of encountered it, it wouldn't be a problem. But if you were flying full bore
my
and
God.
just, bounced off the end of the pencil.
Oh my God.
Because it's weird, like this 3-dimensional perspective. It's like your eyes see things a little bit differently too. But okay, that wasn't answering how do you paint in space. So I had to get everything kind of in arm's length, distance, and have my drink bag, my water bag with the water in it that I was going to squirt the little balls of water out to dip my brush into, and my paper right there. Everything has Velcro on it because you want to stick it to your pant leg or to the wall or something to keep track of it. But I wish I would have videotaped it, the whole process, because if I had activated that brain cell to say, okay, why don't you videotape it, Nikki? But I didn't. And thankfully Bob Thirsk took like the one picture I have of painting in space. I'm so, I hug Bob every time I see him, to thank him for that. But it was just so cool. I think you could describe the whole way it's like to live in microgravity by showing what it's like to paint watercolors. Because of the floating, because of things behaving differently. I have memory of the ball of water, like on the end of the straw of the drink bag, and bringing the brush, which by the way was Ronnie Wood's brush from when he was a kid.
Wow.
And like before I got the tip of the brush to the ball of water, it's like the water wanted to move over on the end of the brush. It was just the weirdest thing. And I remember like standing there, floating, looking at this ball of water floating around the end of the brush, thinking, okay, so what like wacky, weird, magical, attractive thing just went on there to get that ball of water over to the brush before I even touched it, And then the same thing happened when you have to carefully take that ball of water down to the paint, and like it's like the paint reached out and the water moved over to the paint without even touching the ball to the paint. And then the same thing, this colored ball of water moving back on the brush. It was just the weirdest thing. And, once I got over that, then the painting, it was trial and error, because if you actually touch the brush to the paper, the whole blob of colored water would just move to the paper. And I wish I would have thought about it like Richard did with painting, and thought, man, this is just part of the process. This is like microgravity painting. I'll just keep touching all these colored balls, but I didn't, those were scraps. They got thrown out, I think, and then I figured out that I just had to like gently touch, just barely touch the ball of water to the paper and kind of use the brush to drag the colored ball of water versus painting with the end of the brush. It was the weirdest thing. And it took me about 2 weeks to do one painting. And of course you're not painting in front of the window, right? Because what you want to see is gone, before you can get the brush to the paper. And, at 5 miles a second. So I just printed it out on a scrap piece of paper and worked outside my crew compartment every night. And yeah, it was awesome. Really, really cool.
That must have been amazing. I can't imagine. I guess these days they'd probably try and set some streaming thing up so people could watch it live.
Wouldn't it be great though? It would be so cool to do that. I hope they're doing some of that stuff. I just saw Megan just did another hair video, washing your hair in space thing. And, of course they did that, the Space Olympics stuff, a little while ago.
It is really important though, isn't it? Because it does just humanize those guys up there for everyone. And as you say, it's just, I remember in the UK when Tim Peake was up there, and the access the kids had to him in the classroom was just amazing. And it must have inspired so many kids to try science and they were communicating with an astronaut there and there from their classroom in the space. And I love that happens. But the little human touches, and Chris Hadfield was so good at that as well with the videos he was making up there. And, but that now it's so much easier.
It is, the internet is live. They've got the live interweb going on up there. So you can on a pretty routine basis, share pretty actively. I did Twitter up there, but I had to, once a week I sent down 5 tweets and they'd go to my public affairs person who would post them for me because there was no, way to do that live. And I think NASA is even getting that it's important. It's important to share the human side of human spaceflight.
Absolutely.
Emily, I don't know if you've ever seen. I've shown this picture in presentations before. It's this picture of our Expedition 21 crew, and it's when Guy Laliberté was with us. So there were 9 people on board, and of course Guy was the founder of Cirque du Soleil, right? And he grew up like a juggler or something on the streets of Canada, and considered himself a clown. So he brought all of us a red clown nose to space. And actually, when he came on the station for the first time, he floated in from his Soyuz with this red clown nose on. And he gave one to all of us, and we did our crew pictures with him in our fancy blue flight suits. And then we did a number of shots with the red clown noses on, all, in different positions, floating different ways, peace signs, all kinds of stuff. And for quite a while, those were not releasable photos because there was this impression that we were having too much fun. It was, that people might think that we're just goofing around up there, and a couple of us pushed on it. We're like, we want to show kids these pictures. We want to share these pictures with, the audiences that we're speaking to. And then we can talk to things like, what better people to work with than the ones that you're going to enjoy your time with. The best teams really get along, right? There's personality in the group of people that you're working with. And at the same time, when it hits the fan, when things don't go as planned, that these people are going to be the ones that have your back. And to me, that's the kind of picture we need to be using to show that, But here's this human who has done some pretty impressive things, who is like, the best way for him to describe himself is artistically, is as a clown and somebody who wants to connect, with other human beings. And that was fun. There was a picture too that we did on the launch pad before. Actually, I'm sporting my STS-128 shirt, you guys.
Awesome.
Today is the 12th anniversary of docking with Station on that mission. And we did this both on 128 and then on 133, like TCDT day, so our practice countdown day. Out at the launch pad. And then when you get out of the vehicle, you get a chance to, you're still in your orange suit and you get a chance to walk around on the pad a little bit. And we did like this muscle shot, Iron, Mr. Universe and whatever shot with the crew out there. And that was another one that was like, no, we got to hold back on this. We can't really have astronauts looking like they're goofing around on the launch pad. And they became some of the favorite pictures.
Absolutely. No, they should be.
So I think they've loosened up a little bit now. They're allowed to do Space Olympics and show it at the same time.
It's not like you can be working 24/7 either. I mean, that just is a recipe for a mutiny, I believe.
Absolutely.
If you
But it's true. I think this whole human spaceflight thing is becoming more and more important. I think NASA is seeing that and, starting to communicate that a little bit more. They've done that really cool Down to Earth series, that I think people have really been attracted to. Because I think people can make a connection then, right? Establish a relationship with this whole thing about people being in space and, and hopefully be inspired to maybe want to do it themselves or for the kids to want to do it themselves. But even if not, to just have a desire to learn more about what's actually going on up there, which is ultimately all about improving life on Earth.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about you've got a new book coming out.
I do.
Now, Frank White, I know you probably know who that is, obviously.
Yes.
He's written a lot about the overview effect, which, how those who have been to space or have had those types of experiences look at Earth a little differently. So you have a new book called Back to Earth, which looks a lot different from most astronaut memoirs. This one discusses how your perspectives on Earth changed after your time in space. At what point in your spaceflight career did you view the Earth as not just a place or a destination? And why do you think discussing Earth in this manner is important?
I think, even for me before flying in space, it was like I recognized, I knew I lived on a planet, right? But I don't think I ever really actively thought about, wow, I live on a planet. We're all Earthlings. Only border that matters, thin blue line of atmosphere, right? Those kinds of things they really are like our common ground, with everyone. But I think it was really important for me to share that experience. And your question about when did I realize? I mean, I think it came very quickly in the journey, and perhaps even before going to space, kind of in the preparation of it, talking to other people about what they experienced seeing Earth from space. There was a really, I think, high expectation of what that was going to be like, and the impact that would come from it. But like all things, until you do it for real, you don't really know what that's going to be. And man, overwhelming. I think it hits you really quickly. I don't remember what I saw at the window the first time I looked out. I just know I was like, oh my gosh, this is more stunning, more like overwhelmingly beautiful than I ever expected it to be. Just glowing and colorful and, all those things that you might expect, but just like with the brightest light bulb you've ever seen turned on, right? And then at the same time, like in that first viewing, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually here. We just launched into space 8.5 minutes ago or however long ago. And first of all, I survived. I'm alive. It's woo, there's that. And it's like, holy moly, I'm floating in space inside of a spaceship. So there was that. That's an overwhelming part of it too, I think, to come to grips with. But in the end, I think whether it's this impression of the planet, this looking at it out the window, or having worked with this crew of, this international crew representing 15 different countries peacefully, successfully there. The fact that we built this mechanical life support system in space, right? To mimic as best we can what Earth does for us naturally. Thinking about the fact that as a crew every day, we're paying attention. I mean, imagine this, paying attention to how much CO2 is in your atmosphere, because if you don't, you're going to die. How much clean drinking water you have, the integrity of your thin metal hull, the health and well-being of all your crewmates. I mean, every day you're thinking about these things. And that's the kind of stuff I wanted to share was, and all the complexity of it, this planet, Earthling, thin blue line, those are the simple things I came home with. And I want everybody, even if you can't travel to space or don't end up doing it, to like look around yourself and appreciate the awe and wonder that surrounds us every day. And just realize that the best way that we could live together here is as crewmates and not passengers. And that we have this just amazing model, circling us 16 times a day to remind us of that kind of gives us the checklist for how to do it. And to look at how do you take 7 people on a space station and the tens of thousands on Earth that are working that way and, exponentially project that to the 7-8 billion on a planet.
Wow. So when does this book come out?
October 12th is the release date.
Excellent. Not too long.
And it is very different, Emily. I like that you said that too. It was never intended as a memoir, although there are, certainly anecdotal stories of time and space and growing up and stuff that play into it. But I really wanted to showcase the work that's going on the station. People are always asking, you guys get it too, I'm sure, why are we even going to this space station thing? Why do we travel to, why are we spending all that money in space?
Yeah.
That, is all spent down here. And, what are we doing up there that's done me any good lately, right? And then there's these people on Earth that we need to know about that every day are already living like Earthlings and crewmates.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait to read this. Just one little follow-up. You said that the view out the window was obviously spectacular. Camera technology is, of course, getting better and better and better. So when we see images from the station these days, how good are they at representing what you actually saw?
Yeah, I mean, they are so good now, right? Just and in some of it, some of the pictures that I see coming from station now, especially at night, where you really get the good star field patterns in the, in the view and stuff. The cameras are just so good at capturing the light now, some of which we might not even see.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
necessarily to that same degree, unless we get it, unless we really, really get it super dark in the space station, hooded out and, do that. But I'll tell you, visually speaking, what you visually see in those pictures and videos now, the really high def ones. I mean, even on my TV, is it Apple that has the screensaver thing that's just showing views from space all the time? It's like, man, that's really good. That's a lot like what I remember seeing. But I think the thing that's different, and it's like any of us, we go on, you go out to that park and now you're out in the grass and the trees, and it's more than just what you see, right? It's what you're feeling and experiencing and parallel with what your eyes are capturing. And so when I look at the pictures and the videos, they are very much like what I remember seeing. It's reminiscent to me of what I felt, but it's not that same. It's not that same thing of when you're physically there floating in front of the window, to see it. Yeah. But I'll tell you, they are so good. It would be wonderful. And I know Frank and others are doing things like this with like VR, and, Felix and Paul just did something up on the station where, if I could go into one of those float tanks, and have that surrounding me, those views just surrounding me on the tub lid, that would be incredible. I mean, that would be really, really incredible.
We've got a question now. We've got a few questions here from some of our Patreons, and this first one kind of I think it ties in slightly with that. So Lauren has asked, if you had the opportunity, and obviously there's plenty of new companies out there, if you had the opportunity to go back, if someone said, hey Nicole, come next week, we're going to take you up again, would you do it?
Absolutely. The thing is, I think I would want, and I would take one of those suborbital rides. Do not get me wrong. I would love to do that too, but I just want so many other people to have the experience that I would want to take a seat away from somebody for, for someone else to have that, even for 5 minutes, that like, oh my gosh, view out the window. I would love to go back. I would love to go back to the space station or a space station. I would love to go to the moon. I'm counting on a trip to the moon.
Nice. Yes.
Absolutely counting on it. And I might need to become independently wealthy somehow to
that book,
do that. Yeah, that's it. That's why you write the book, right? You're going to rake in the cash on the book. But yeah, I mean, I'm counting on it. It's like I always say, my last trip to space, not my final trip to space.
Nice.
Because I'm counting on the chance somehow to get back there again.
Awesome. So Rish has asked, was it easier going to space a second time around? Do you have a favorite mission, or are they kind of like children where you don't really have a favorite?
Yeah, I don't think you can have a favorite, right? And when it's kind of the question, like, what was your favorite thing about being in space? It's like it's all kind of wrapped up in this one big moment of being in space, kind of thing. There are things that are easier about it, I think, the second time. And I remember on my second flight, which was STS-133, which was a 2-week mission. It was the final flight of Discovery. And we went to the space station, right? But we were only there for 2 weeks. So, I joked that they had to pull my clawing hands off the hatch to get me back in the shuttle to come home. But I was really fortunate that on that second flight, I was with some people that I had flown with the first time too. And one of those being Mike Barrett. And when we were both on the station the first time, the cupola wasn't there. The cupola module wasn't there yet. And our best views of Earth were in the service module with, some of the windows, Earth facing there. And then to go into the Japanese laboratory module and look, kind of port across the Earth that way. But there wasn't this horizon to horizon view that the cupola gives you. And I remember we had docked to the station, everybody's floating in order onto the station. And Mike and I went in together. And it was almost like, first of all, it was like we were back in our second home. The floating was good. We felt comfortable already. We knew what handrail you had to push off of to get down to the other end of the space station. And it was like this silent challenge. We both come onto the station, and the two of us could not fly fast enough to that cupola module.
Oh, wow.
With the hope that the windows were open and that we'd get to see this, this view that we just hadn't seen before. But there was no having to get used to flying. through the space station
Wow.
again. There was no, which handrail do I grab? Oh, I don't want to knock the computers off the wall or, whatever. It just felt natural to be there. And that was kind of cool to see how your brain, your muscle memory, whatever kind of takes over, with that.
That is amazing. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm hoping to get a ride up on one of those things.
Yeah,
someday.
baby.
Someday. We'll see.
Yeah, I'll hitch a ride with you. Anyway, we've got one more question, which is just a little bit of fun. So you mentioned George Clooney in Gravity earlier. So I probably should have asked it then, but it seems like a nice one to end on. Jen Jones has asked, once you get back from space, do you seek out space movies or TV shows? And do you watch them differently as a result of your own space flight?
Well, I had always sought them out even before flying in space. And yeah, I think, and maybe even before I looked at them a little critically, like anybody in any field, I think when you see a movie about what you do, you're like, man, we'd never do that. How do they do that? Yeah. And, for me, like some of my favorite space movies are ones like Galaxy Quest and, Rocket Man and, stuff like that, where technically there's probably not a whole lot of good technical going on it, but just the human interaction between people and stuff is so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
And Clooney on, Gravity was one of those where, I remember like really kind of edge of my seat, stuff going on there just because of the things you saw happening to the spacecraft that you would never want to see happen in reality, right? And while George out there kind of tooling around in the EMU with no tether on and just meeting Sandra Bullock for the first time while she's out at the end of it, these things like you don't even know your crewmates kind of thing, the drama of the Hollywood side of it. Man, they got the graphics. The graphics were so good in that movie. And to the point of like how they moved was just like watching Sandra Bullock fly through the station. It's like, man, that is really good. But the light on the spacecraft and the way things looked as they were coming apart and, just stuff you would never, ever want to see happen. And yet they did a really good job graphically portraying that. That really got me.
Yeah. I wonder whether there was a plan to shoot that movie or release that movie before the end of the shuttle, because I can't imagine that would have been fun to watch before going on the shuttle.
I don't know. But there was so much technically wrong with, just the physics of a lot of the stuff that, I got past all the other things because I'm like, okay, maybe that could never happen. Maybe that could never happen.
Yeah, that movie was a little freaky, man. I enjoyed it. But I was like, with the horrible parts were going on, I was like, okay, no, I can't do this.
Yeah,
wow.
And the first time I went was with my mom and my sisters. And
no, yeah,
yeah. Thankfully, I'm already done flying.
Yeah.
At this point,
Yeah. The shuttle that machine's done now. It's retired.
Which is so sad. Oh my gosh, that's so sad.
I know. Emily, have you got anything?
I know. I think we're good, and this was an amazing interview. I think we're at a good stopping point. So thank you so much for being on our show, and we
congratulations for a year of space and things. And
thank you.
You're rocking it, you guys. It's really, really good. Really good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We're trying our best, and thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you very
now.
much.
The start of year 2. We thought we'd start on a high. That's for sure.
I hope we'll see you again this way.
Absolutely.
Well, if you hadn't changed any, it's really something else. I tell you, John had been telling me about him for 3 years, but ain't no way you can describe it.
Well. That's a way to start year 2, isn't it?
Yes, that was just spectacular. I've talked to Nicole a little bit before, and she's just always whenever you get out of a conversation with her, you're always smiling from ear to ear. And I really cannot wait for her book that's coming out soon, because I've read like every astronaut autobiography or biography that's been released. And there's a lot of really good ones out there, obviously. But I like that this one, I haven't seen this book yet. I don't have an advanced copy, but I plan on buying it when it gets out, when it's released. But it seems to take a sort of a more unorthodox, I guess, approach to astronaut books. Like, it doesn't just talk about I was born and then I grew up and then I went to space,
Yeah.
Oh, this one is more like, how it sort of affected her worldview. And I love that. I think that's such a different, just a really nice way to, look at that whole experience. I just love it. I think it's awesome.
Agreed. Jen, there was so many highlights in that interview as well, wasn't there? There was so many little moments where I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so cool.
Yeah. When she was talking about painting in space, that blew my mind because I never thought about that in my life.
You're not using the brush as a brush. You're using it to guide the globule of water and paint. Just amazing. Amazing.
I never thought about how different it would be to use watercolor in space because on Earth, I'm not an artist, but I've done a little bit of painting and, watercolor is difficult. So, I never really thought about it in that way before. And just to hear it from somebody who's done that is just absolutely mind-blowing to me because I'm like, of course it would be completely different from how you would paint here. That's, oh my God. Yeah, there's so many highlights of this interview. Oh my God.
Yeah, I liked how we went from the art side of it to talking about the humanization of human spaceflight and how connecting to the people is really important and how NASA are beginning to understand this as well. Because when I look back historically at the stories that we know and love, Emily, Al Bean got mentioned there, the fourth person to walk on the moon. Now, when I'm talking to people who don't know anything about the Apollo program, I try and reel them in with the human stories. And the more you let people know about Al Bean, the more they want to know about the Apollo program because he's such an incredible person. And if we're going to connect with as many people as possible about spaceflight and inspire them to want to know more, it's through the human stories. That's what's really going to do it. It's letting them know about the people who are up there, who have been, who are going to go. That's how we're going to get people involved who don't have any interest in it at the moment. So, I love that part of the conversation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like this year when I did my talk at Space Fest, when I was writing the talk, I was doing it a lot about, astronaut books and space literature in general. But mainly I wanted to talk about people. It wasn't really a talk about books as much as about the people and what they wrote in them, because whenever you read literature, it really just, in the mid 60s, if you looked at a picture of like Mike Collins, for example, just pulling out an arbitrary, astronaut name. If you looked at a picture of Mike Collins in the 60s, you would have thought he looks like an Air Force dude, he looks like a fighter jock, whatever. And then you read Carrying the Fire and you're like, wait a minute, this guy is like the best writer, and it is really like sophisticated,
Why didn't we find out about that when he was flying?
Yeah, why didn't we know?
And I find that really frustrating. And I think actually it's one of the reasons why the Apollo program probably got cancelled because the interest wasn't there because we didn't find out about these human stories. That's how important they are. Potentially if they'd been able to get that story out, then more people may have connected with it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely because if you look at, Apollo 15, Al Warden was on it, obviously, and, very different set of personalities there. But with Al, I don't think anybody figured out who he was until like 40 years after the mission, when he wrote Falling to Earth. Then we were like, oh, he's a poet. We didn't, and it's just nuts. It's like, I wish we'd sort of known more about it back then, but I think back then NASA was less into the idea of humanizing people, and I think they wanted them to be, astronauts and, very, very manly and stuff like that. I don't know. Of its time. And nowadays, I love that. I think in the last decade or so, if you've watched NASA TV or if you've just watched any spaceflight coverage, I think you see that people are being more humanized. You do sort of see the more fun parts of it, and you do see the more like, parts where people try to depict their own experiences from it.
Oh, absolutely. The SpaceX launches with the Crew Dragon, like there's been 3 of them now, but the first one with Bob and Doug last summer, I mean, that was incredible. We for the first time, maybe you had that over there, but the first time in this country, because of the internet, we could see all the aspects of the build up to them going to the rocket. We saw them in the suit up room, and then we saw them walking through the corridor, coming out, and then my favorite moment was they came out and got into the cars that took them over to the launch pad. But before that, they had their last moments with the family, and we're watching it. They've got their kids there and their wives, and Bob and Doug are standing there and having a hug with them, and especially with all the COVID stuff that was going on at the time as well. There was issues with that, and oh my God, I was just sitting here sobbing, but felt so connected to these two people and their families, and they're about to go off into space. It was amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we do need to see, more of that, because like I said, I think there are certain experiences, I hope there are certain experiences that are universal to a lot of people, and that's, connecting with people you love, and connecting to maybe art, or, being a part of nature or something like
Absolutely.
that. And I think those experiences can be relatable to space flight as well. So absolutely, I completely agree with you.
Excellent. It's good to be in agreement. But of course, that interview was wonderful. And for those of you who would like to know more about Nicole or her book, all the information will be in the show notes, and you can go and pre-order your copy right now, or make sure you're following her on social media. And if you want to watch that interview, the complete uncut version, we did have to cut a bit out for time, then you can do so on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/space and things. But the show notes are the place to go to find out all things Nicole Stott.
And from every window, we have a really spectacular view of the Earth, and as well as the what surprised me, the real blackness of space. I don't think I've ever seen black as it is out here.
So we've got a few news stories for you this week. We'll start with the launches, as always. SpaceX were back in business for the first time since June the 30th. On Sunday, the 29th of August, they launched a cargo Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station from the Space Coast in Florida. And it arrived on astronaut Megan McArthur's 50th birthday, to which she has said, "No one ever sent me a spaceship for my birthday before." Which I really loved. The uncrewed Dragon capsule had 4,800 pounds or 2,200 kilograms worth of supplies and scientific experiments on board. It seemed like we were talking about a different SpaceX launch every week earlier this year, specifically with them launching their own Starlink satellites. Now, there's been a major space event this last week called the Space Symposium, where quite a few of our news stories are going to be coming from this week. But the SpaceX president and chief operating officer, Gwynne Shotwell, explained why there's been a delay in their launches. It's because they've been adding laser terminals to the next batch of Starlink satellites, and it's taken a while to get that right. Now, the lasers are being added so they can better get the constellations of satellites to communicate with each other without needing multiple ground stations. I think I've got that right. And even if I have, I've simplified it massively. But as always, there will be articles in the show notes where you can read up all about this and all of our stories, actually. And you can find these on your podcast platform. Or if they don't work there, if the links are broken, just head to our website, spaceandthingspodcast.com, and they're all on there, sometimes with videos as well. They're either on the front page if you're listening to this episode as it comes out, or within the archive. But also talking to things that Gwynne Shotwell said at the Space Symposium, she also said there is currently a shortage of liquid oxygen, which could upset future launch dates this year, as hospitals treating COVID-19 rely on liquid oxygen for ventilator treatments. So yeah, this is another reason why we need to encourage people to stay safe and get vaccinated. If you want space launches, you need people off the ventilators.
Yes, go get your shots, everybody.
Absolutely.
All right. Also, on Thursday, August 26th, Blue Origin returned to flight for the first time since their first crewed flight in July. This time on an uncrewed suborbital flight from their West Texas base. It was the company's 17th flight for one of their new Shepard rockets and was the 8th flight for the RSS H.G. Wells, the capsule dedicated to uncrewed jaunts. It carried a number of experiments aboard and some art projects too. But perhaps the most interesting launch attempt this week happened in Alaska. The California startup company called Astra had their third orbital test flight on August 28th but it didn't go according to plan. If you haven't seen the video, you really need to. It felt like it was going to be one of those old school NASA launch attempt videos from the 1950s with the rocket going sideways at first, but it eventually did manage to start moving slowly up and managed to reach, I think, 2.5 miles up before the engine shut down annoyingly. A piece of booster then broke loose and the rocket lost control, so the flight was terminated. It has since been said that one of the 5 engines shut down during liftoff, which is why the rocket went sideways. I hate laughing at this. But the others corrected the error, which allowed it to get off the ground without disaster on the launch pad. So yeah, it did a little cha-cha slide before it left.
Cha-cha slide. Amazing.
Oh my God.
I'm pretty. Yeah, I think it got higher than 2 miles. I'm pretty sure it got up to 20 miles.
I may have read it incorrectly. All I know is that I was watching that launch and I was like, what? What? What is this? I've never seen this happen in my life. Oh my God. And I hate laughing because, I feel bad when anybody has a launch failure, but I was not expecting that.
It was just, it just went sideways. It stayed vertical. It just like moved across. It was like, what's going on? And I just assumed it was just going to blow up there and then, because that's in the old.
Me too.
That's what you used to see. And then all of a sudden, it starts coming out of the cloud and you're like, oh no, it's going. It's actually going. You have to see this video. It will be in our show notes on our website. It's amazing. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's nuts. Like, all I remember was, I'll talk a little bit more about it and then I'll drop it. Like, I stopped like one of the stills from the launch. Like, I stopped it and I paused it and then I was like looking at how far the launch pad was from the rocket. I was like, oh my God.
Absolutely. I've never seen
my God.
anything like it. Crazy.
Yeah.
But they're saying they got some good data from it, so hopefully they've learned. It's still very much a new company, so
exactly.
Good luck to them in the future, and thanks for entertaining us with that one. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Meanwhile, on the International Space Station, as well as the new cargo ship arriving, we've got a few stories here. Firstly, the 7 astronauts on board posed with an Olympic torch to celebrate the start of the Paralympic Games this week in Tokyo. The torch obviously wasn't lit, but I do love it when the Space Station do this kind of thing, as we talked about earlier. Really does humanize the people for me, which is always great. Also, there was a planned spacewalk that had to be cancelled because NASA's flight engineer Mark Van der Hey is currently suffering from a pinched nerve in his neck. Now, fortunately, the spacewalk isn't time sensitive and the pinched nerve isn't considered an emergency in space, so they are able to rearrange the spacewalk without any drama. But there is potentially some drama up there, as Russia have reported that there are some cracks in their Zarya module. Now, so the exact term they're using is superficial fissures. And it's not yet been reported if these have caused any air to leak from the module. This was actually the first piece of the ISS to reach orbit when it launched in November 1998. So it's been up there a while. They have in the past been able to fix cracks on other modules, so hopefully they'll be able to make the required repairs here as well. And more news from the Space Symposium event. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson has revealed that the station should last until 2030. Then he expects commercial labs to take over in orbit. I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be gutted when the ISS is no longer there. It feels like it's part of the furniture of our life now. It's been such a huge part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been almost up there, God, almost half of my life now.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think I was 20. I was 20 when they launched it. Now I'm 40. The first pieces, and now I'm 43. So yeah, I've been watching it pass over for all that time.
Yeah.
That's nuts. That's a long time.
I know there's still 9 years till 2030, but I'm not ready. I'm not ready
me neither.
yet.
And I'm getting a little off topic, but I'm wondering how they're going to bring it down.
Yeah, I imagine they'll break it down into pieces, won't they? They'll release different modules at a time. I imagine, because they can't let that crash through in one go.
Skylab was big, but this is way bigger. So yeah, I don't know how they would do it in one piece. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we will.
We'll find out eventually. But some good news. We recently reported that the Hubble Space Telescope has had some problems, but that they managed to get it back online. Well, the long-awaited follow-up, the James Webb Space Telescope, has finally passed all its ground tests and is being prepared to be taken from its current home in California to French Guiana, where it will be launched on an Ariane 5 rocket. The telescope has been in the making for the last 30 years, and it is a joint project between NASA and ESA, the European Space Agency, and will attempt to answer questions about the formation of the first stars and galaxies. I'm
so excited about this. So excited about this.
Yep.
You think of the images we're still getting from Hubble, and it's old technology, and yet you've got something new there about to go up. Very excited. Anyway, and finally, if you're into the stock market, then you may have noticed that both Virgin Orbit and Rocket Lab have recently gone public. And if you're anything like me, then you probably don't know what that means. But I think it might mean that we can now buy shares in those companies. But check the articles in the show notes for more info if you're an investment type.
Flight crew, OTC, close and lock your visors, initiate O2 flow.
One final thing to discuss before we wind up this week's show. You may remember our 50th episode a few weeks ago where we spoke to Brittany Phillips about her upcoming analog mission to Mars. Well, she and her crewmates are now safely back on Earth, having completed their mission, and we've been hearing some wonderful reports and seeing some amazing photos of their experience. We've been sharing them on our socials, so please do check them out. A reminder, we're at Space and Things 1 on Twitter and at Space and Things Podcast on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, Brittany even wore her Space and Things t-shirt in their hab, and she took a Space and Things pin outside on her EVAs, which is very cool. Very cool. Now, I'm on holiday next week, but we've already got next week's episode recorded, so the only thing we'll be missing next week is the news, but we've got a great interview next week as well, so that's all coming in episode 54, but the news will return in a fortnight. But right now, don't forget, in space no one can hear you stream.
Space and Things has been brought to you by And Things Productions.